Monk, your books are good, but they're not popular. Editors, they want a black book.
They have a black book. I'm black, and it's my book.
You know what I mean.
Hey, ShotDeck, what's up? We got another Shot Talk. I'm super excited about this. It's a film I just recently watched that's coming out soon. That's fantastic. You should all see it. It's called American Fiction, directed by Jefferson. And we have the cinematographer, Cristina Dunlap, with us to talk about the film and talk about her and the career and the challenges of making this movie, the fun stuff. So here we go, Shot Talk, American Fiction. Well, congrats on this film. It's one of those movies that is surprising and obviously very funny. It reminded me in parts of sort of Alexander Payne. It's got a bit of a misanthrope at the center of it in a really great way. Tell me a little bit about how you got part of this project and in the early days of prepping and how you and Cord sort of started your process and what kinds of things you do when you're sent the script. Like, tell me first, like, how'd you get the movie?
It was a very unusual way. I came from a background in music videos and commercials, and I had actually met one of Cord's colleagues on a music video shoot years ago, and she was assisting Cord on this movie. And she actually remembered me and sent me the script and said, hey, Cord's looking for a DP, and I think you guys would really get along, and he wants to know if you can grab lunch if you like the script. So I read the script and it absolutely blew me away. I had never read a script like this before. And I said, yeah, I definitely would love to meet him for lunch. And so we went to lunch, and he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize the producers had set up meetings for me with a bunch of DPs. And I didn't know that, they were going to do that. So I'm really happy to meet you. And I loved our meeting, and I would love to work with you, but, I have to take these other meetings as well. And I said, of course, no problem. But I learned through friends who he was interviewing, and I thought, I'm never going to hear from him again.
How do you? I remember. I mean, even now, it's sort of like at any point when you sort of know who you're up against is a tricky thing.
Yeah, I mean, these people had incredible credits, and sometimes it's hard to be the first person to meet with the director because you don't know if you're either going to make an impression or they're going to be excited about everyone else down the line. But he meant what he said, and he came back after meeting people, and he said, yeah, I still want to work with you. So it was pretty incredible.
That's a really good point. I think I've had more success being the last person than the first person. The first person's hard because then everyone who follows either beats you. I guess, listen, it's hard either way to get a job. It's always fun. And so in that early days, how do you prep? Like, how do you prepare for that first meeting? Do you have a certain sort of way in which you sort of have prepped in the past for your narrative work, or do you have to try to sort of gauge a second meeting? Tell me a little bit about, that part of your process.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with this script, he wrote a lot of the visual language into the script. And so when I was reading it, I was having so many ideas, and I was so excited. So honestly, when I'm reading a script, I often pull up ShotDeck, and when a scene is reminding me of something, I'll look it up and I'll get inspired, and I'll just start making a folder of inspiration images while I'm reading. And then I go back through and I filter through those, and I make it more cohesive, and I see what's working and what's not once I've finished the entire script. And then I'll make a pretty extensive lookbook depending on, this script in particular. It's satire, but it's also a family drama. And then there's a lot of different elements of rom-com and action film and surrealism. So I was kind of pulling from all over the place, and then trying to find a way to make that into one cohesive language was really the challenge in this one.
And then here, let's pull up some shots from the movie first so we can get started talking about that. But when do you present that to Cord? Like what part of the process do you like, okay, first you have to say you're the person, we're gonna hire you. And then from that point, do you sort of gauge out, okay, how do you want to work? Do you want to start presenting stuff? Like, tell me a little bit about that, you know, because again, everyone works differently, and sometimes the director takes the lead. Sometimes it's in a position where you can really take the lead visually on a movie, and depending on the person.
Yeah, well, this was actually Cord's first feature. So I came to that lunch meeting with the lookbook and I said, you know, I've prepared something. I don't want to overwhelm you or steer you in the wrong direction. So I want to hear what you're thinking and, you know, talk through it with you. But I'm happy to share this, you know, book that I've made with you. And we talked a lot about different references and movies. It was more tonally what he was
Yep.
inspired by. And then I think visually he was really open to any ideas, and so we sort of talked about, and this is something else I actually use ShotDeck a lot for, is because it's so subjective, trying to say like, this is what a funny shot looks like to me, or this is what a medium close up, when I say that, this is what I mean, and just to really get on the same page, especially, you know, because Cord was such an open book. He wanted to, he was like, show me what you mean. When you say like, let's go wide angle and close, like, why does that look funnier than being a long lens and further away? So I was able to, you know, pull up different shots from different movies and sort of show him what I meant.
Again, we don't do these to sell ShotDeck, but because it sounds like the way Cristina,
No,
but
I know. I'm sorry.
honestly,
I just love it.
no. But honestly, I feel like it's one of the ways that I use it too. It's not just for pitch decks and this and that, but it's like literally to communicate, oh, what does this feel like? And also, I think also for writer directors that may not be super visual, and nor do they have to be. It's a great way just to actually get them to start to understand things they've been watching in movies for years, but to now understand it in terms that, you know, like you can communicate with the camera. So it's like, oh, right, this is the difference between a long lens and a wide lens with the same field of view, you know, or the same frame size, you know, that kind of stuff. It's a
Yeah.
great use of that.
I've done some mentoring in the past, and I've been able to pull things to sort of make a visual deck of what different lenses feel like and when to use them and why. And yeah, so
Very pre shot deck. I remember I thought it was like the most exciting thing that ever happened to me. It was like very early on. Somebody was like, we need to do a presentation for Netflix executives for them to understand cinematography a little bit. And this is pre shot deck, but I basically did that. I like created these like PDFs talking about like aspect ratio, wide lens versus long lens. And it was like exactly that. It was like a deck that just sort of explained some of the primer things for a bunch of, you know, bored Netflix execs. But
is
I was
that
like
what
so
gave you the
excited.
idea for this?
No. By then I would already had the idea. It just took me 8 years to finally get off my ass and start to build it. But it was sort of early days in how I was sort of prepping by using screen grabs and using sort of, you know, examples of movie references to help communicate with directors. That came from the earliest days, you know, breaking down car scenes and talking about where we want to put the camera in the car and those and the sizing and the overs and all this sort of stuff. It was always a way to sort of help communicate with directors. Let's talk a little bit about when you sort of approached the movie. First of all, you guys shot in Boston, correct? All in and
Yes,
around Boston, or sort of near the shore. A lot of it takes place in this sort of like house by the shore that the family has. Tell me,
yeah,
where was that?
that's in Situate, Massachusetts, which actually one of our producers, that was his hometown, and he didn't choose it on purpose, but it happened to work out. And the house we ended up shooting in, we were scouting, and this woman walked up, and it was his high school art teacher or middle school art teacher, and it was her Airbnb that we were filming in.
Is
So
that right?
I felt a lot of pressure to do the town justice and photograph it in a authentic way.
And you were there at what part of the year?
We were there in summer.
give me some facts about the movie. So you shot in and around Boston and this sort of town near the shore. How many days shooting did you guys have?
We had 26 days.
What?
Yeah, and then we had one
Well
pickup
done.
day in Los Angeles. Thank you.
26 days. That's not a lot of time. All right, so 26 days. That already is like, okay, we're making this movie. Has obviously, what did that present for you in terms of a director, a first-time feature director, obviously very experienced writer, has been around the business. What kinds of ways did that sort of present as challenges for you in examples of like, oh, this scene we only, we had to sort of knock all this stuff out in a certain amount of time. Like, pick a scene and talk to me about some of the challenges and how you beat them.
Okay. That's like which one to choose.
I'll pick this scene just so I get it started, right? So you're doing like this symposium for writers and stuff like that. Starts with with Jeffrey Wright just obviously going to a small room, very sort of utilitarian. Tell me a little bit about the look of this. I love the juxtaposition of these two things, color and size wise, between their two worlds of success at this point.
Thanks. We wanted to make this initial room look as depressing as possible, just very stark and cool and sort of, it's a visual way to explain his state of mind at that time. After coming home after his troubles at work. And then when we move into East's room, I wanted it to be very warm and grand and, something that he would be envious of.
And is this these are both practical locations, I assume?
Everything on this was a practical location. We had no stage days. But yeah, this was actually in a convention center in downtown Boston. I'm forgetting the name of the location, but it is a beautiful, beautiful location. And we filmed a lot of different things in here. I think we were there 5 days. But yeah.
Did it give you anything for free? Did you have to and when you're location scouting in practical locations, talk to me in terms of what you're looking for and what, you're obviously walking in with the expectation of like, I know I have limited time and I have maybe limited resources as well. Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for this film in particular, we had a lot of time to scout, which was a luxury. We had 8 weeks of prep for 26 days. That's pretty incredible.
Smart though. If you have less
Yes.
time to shoot, get the prep in. That's where you're gonna make it happen. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was very grateful for that. So we looked at a lot of locations. That was myself, Cord, our production designer, Jonathan Guggenheim, and our producers, Ben and Nikos, in a minivan, just carpooling around Boston, road tripping for those 8 weeks. And we really had to be specific about the locations. And there was not really like, oh, can we make this work? Or we'll change the, windows, or it was just the location really had to fit, or we had to make it fit. So the house at the beach in particular was a really difficult location because I was sort of envisioning this like beachy Martha's Vineyard, light interiors, and this was the house that everyone fell in love with. And I looked at the dark walls and I knew that they wanted to hold the ocean through the windows. And I just thought, this is going to be a nightmare. I think most days I had every light on the truck blasting into that room to maintain an exposure.
Yeah, I've been in that exact situation in a couple places where, again, it's the one that really you can tell everyone else is on board with, and you're like, okay, well, at some point, the majority rules, but now it's my problem to sort of figure out. I thought you did a really lovely job with it. I didn't ever for a second when I was watching the film think of those limitations of those darker walls,
Thank you.
It added sort of an internal contrast that was sort of really appealing. And then in terms of like the window treatments and stuff like that, are you then saying, okay, well, listen, I'm going to need this to kind of soften this room and help spread it out? And does that become part of the conversation with the production designer?
Yes, we talked a lot about window treatments, and he was so excited and had so many ideas, and just everything. I was like, that's gonna just be this glowing, horrible thing in the room. And he was very kind in getting me darker curtains, even though that wasn't initially what he wanted. But you can see the ceiling in almost every shot, even though we're in a 2:3:5 aspect ratio. So I couldn't put anything in, sometimes we could hide a tube here or there, but everything was coming in through those windows. So we'd ND and net what we could, and I'd buy myself a few stops, but it was metering at like 0.8 inside and 64 plus outside, and we were just doing everything we can to pump light into that room. We used a lot of the CRLS mirrors, which I could use to hit the back wall and make something to break it up, which I loved. That was a major tool for us on this film.
And what about like other units in terms of just for these windows? You were saying were you using more LED fixtures at HMIs, or what is your sort of go-to for like a day interior kind of thing?
Mostly HMIs and HMIs into bounces sometimes, so it wasn't coming through. But yeah, a lot of HMIs, just getting as much light in as possible. The LEDs weren't doing anything for us at this point.
And what, in terms of the widescreen format, was that a conversation with Cord that was fairly straightforward, or was it a little bit of understanding that the differences between choices of aspect ratio for a younger film, for a filmmaker who his first feature kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, he was really open to any aspect ratio, but early on in the scouting, I would take Artemis out and sort of try and block the scenes with our AD and whoever else was kind enough to stand in for me, so we could do sort of storyboards. And I would take them in 1:8:5 and 2:3:5 just to show Cord the difference. And we had such an incredible cast, but a lot of these scenes, there were multiple people in them, and I knew we didn't have time to cover everybody the way you might with a longer schedule. So we orchestrated these shots that were pretty Steadicam heavy, where you're flowing from one room into another room and the coverage rotates around. And being that the main character is named Thelonious Monk, we knew we wanted there to be this like rhythm and jazziness to the way the camera was moving. And then every now and again, someone will come and infiltrate as and we'll whip pan over, sort of how we open the film, or we'll let someone come into frame and take over his world. But the main visual discussion was isolating Monk, and that's sort of how we open the film, in this one very clean shot of him on a long lens. And that was really how we wanted to introduce the character, because character introductions are so important to me. I think, I'm trying to remember a good example, but there's so many movies I've been inspired by that the character introduction is just such a huge part of the visual language of the rest of the film. So I always think about that when I'm prepping.
Would you say his isolation, that's a great subtle psychological thing that was really effective in the film, in the sense of, I really was feeling his aloneness and his sort of almost like the world was against him. Everything was working against him, and maybe from his own, his own devices, but like that, the visual language of the film really helped sell that.
Thank you. Yeah, his brother describes him as unknowable in the movie, and that was definitely something I always took into consideration. And then it does seem like everything and everyone is against him. So in those moments, I tried to have him a little more boxed in, like people are closing in on him and these ideas are closing in on him. And especially in the office with Arthur.
Oh yeah, later on.
Yeah, there's always someone in frame with him dirtying it up, because it's not his own personal decision. It is the influence of everybody else, and he's sort of getting pulled in this direction.
Oh yeah, even boxing him in sort of in here or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you were talking about people infiltrating his world. This is obviously a very simple piece of visual language. It's in the trailer and stuff, but this idea of like seeing him at the back of the room when Issa Rae's character, reveals like the language of her book, that is well, certainly different than the person she presents on stage. And then this person interrupts, and then the next person interrupts the woman in front, and this like series of people basically like shutting him out and taking over his frame. I thought was like a really simple but effective visual piece in a static frame, letting like the blocking of the characters kind of tell that.
Would you give us the pleasure of reading an excerpt?
Yo, Sharonda, girl, you be pregnant again? If I is, Ray Ray is gonna be a real father this time around.
It's actually very early on with Cord, when we were discussing the visual language of film, he showed me this GIF, and it's David Robinson, the basketball player, sitting on a bench, and he's watching, and this white woman just stands up and completely blocks him. And he said, I feel like this is a visual metaphor for the film. And so that was always in the back of my mind. And when we were blocking this scene, I said, what if we actually just replicate that? Because Monk is in this moment, he's watching everything he's up against. It's, he's in a very bad state of mind. And I think it would be really funny if this white woman just stood up and completely, took over the frame.
I think that's great. All right, talk to me. Let's just go into this little driving scene here. Is it LEDs? Is it panels?
Yes. Well, this shot was initially a daytime shot, and then with weather and other unforeseen circumstances, it became a night shot, over the course of an hour.
When it was day, was it always going to be on stage, or was it when it was day, were you going to shoot it live?
This is live.
Oh, that's still live.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought maybe it was done. It was done like, I know you said, oh, everything's practical. Well, it is, I guess.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. I mean, that means a lot. No, this was a particularly challenging scene because we only had about 20 minutes to rig something, and with his glasses, you could see every light I was putting anywhere. So we were problem solving, hiding things, trying to find ways to just get light together. But it was LED, and they were on a process trailer.
Right, but LED lighting, but not LED panels like a volume type, or or like a four-wall sort of scenario, right?
No, yeah.
Because for a minute I thought, well, maybe it is just because it's become so commonplace, even on TV and smaller things. It's not like it's a huge budget thing to have those kind of solutions as much as they used to be. But then there's like these great little, every time there's these great kicks in the overs that are coming from like the environment that I thought, oh, that would be cool if you somehow did that even on stage to like make it feel more, because it's really, obviously it is real, so it's great. I was like, this is a really effective, if it is done on stage, it's really great. But it's great even then. And so, yeah, because obviously now you're going, I want to exploit as much of the free world as possible, and use, obviously the low light capabilities of these sensors to kind of give life to the background with available light, right?
Yeah,
how
exactly.
Did you choose your lenses? Talk to me a little bit about lens choice on this film.
Well, I knew we were going to shoot mini LF because we needed the 4K resolution. And I didn't want to shoot anamorphic because I feel like sometimes that can really make you feel like you're watching a movie. And, there's all these interesting traits that can sort of distract. And Cord and I really wanted people to find something they relate to in this film and to feel for Monk and feel for the family. So I felt like choosing spherical was the right move because it's a lot easier to, I think, lose yourself in the film when you're not constantly aware that you're looking through a lens. So we tested a lot of different lenses in Boston of what they had available to us. And I love the Blackwing lenses. I think they render skin tones so beautifully, and there's something very naturalistic about them, while having enough character that it's not too clean and flat. Like the flares that we were getting in the beach house, often they're very blue, and I loved the look of those cooler flares coming into his world.
Yeah, like in here, you can see some of that. That's sort of just from the highlights coming around.
Mhm. Yeah, because especially in that space, I knew looking into windows all the time we were going to get those flares, and there was without giving away, a tragedy that occurred in that house that I wanted to feel a presence of. So that was definitely a big part of my decision for those lenses.
What were like when you look at when you sort of approach beyond the sort of basics of 26 Days and whatever, every movie has challenges. What were sort of either locations or besides, like you talked a little bit about the house interior and the house, that were like, this is going to be one that I really focused a bunch of attention during prep on to try to sort of figure out how to do this in the time and the resources that you guys had?
I mean, any night exterior, definitely. Like in the pool scenes there, we were in this house in a backyard and we couldn't get a condor there because of the geography of the house. And in Boston, my gaffer actually, I don't know if this is common practice, but I'd never heard it before. They had a arborist come climb trees and hang gem balls like 20, 30 feet up in the trees for us. So we had light in the backyard. And I was just, everyone had to be a problem solver on this film, and I was often amazed at the solutions people came up with that I didn't even know existed. So
Well, speaking to that, that's a great solution. Like in terms of here's part of this. I love this lovely scene in this frame, and just like the lighting in this, I thought was extraordinarily good and beautiful but natural.
What do you see in my brother?
He's funny.
Mm-hmm. He's not funny.
No, not ha-ha funny.
No.
Like sad funny.
Okay.
Like a three-legged dog.
There's a couple shots where you guys he's out there looking out on the beach, which is always a huge challenge at night.
yes.
And so, out like a shot like this or a shot, the previous one, what are you doing to solve this?
This we were able to get a condor down on the beach. So we kind of parked one around the bend and had it pointing back toward us because there was actually a lighthouse there. So I wanted it to feel like there was a lighthouse in the distance. And then for the beach, we did have a condor, and we made a truss of LED panels that we skirted and diffused, and the winds were blowing really heavily. It was freezing cold. We kept having to like check the wind meter. Are we going to have to pull it down? And Leslie Uggams, who's just incredible, she's in her 80s in a bathrobe wading in the water and freezing cold. So we didn't have a lot of time to shoot because we wanted to get her in, but she kept wanting to go back for another take.
But correct me if I'm wrong, you're actually shooting back towards the houses from the water here, right?
Yes, there I did have a camera operator in the water looking back toward the houses. And then I had my other operator sort of running with Monk down the beach.
You were saying you did a fair amount of Steadicam on the film. Tell me a little bit about that choice. Obviously, you mentioned a little bit of the Thelonious jazz aspect and the fluidity of the camera, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, being that it has a lot of satirical elements in the film, I didn't want to shoot it like a comedy, but I also didn't want to miss holding people in frame together. So that really helped with the 2:3:5 aspect ratio. And then just watching the blocking of we came up with our own blocking, but I didn't want to impose it on any of the actors. I wanted to see what they were going to do. So Cord and I would come in with an idea of what we wanted, but I just wanted to sort of watch rehearsal first and see how much of it was going to mesh together. And then we would either, replan the path of the Steadicam or change it around. But I really wanted to be able to move through the characters and not be super wide all the time. But I wanted to see what everyone was thinking and feeling and doing in those moments, and include everyone in the frame without being so distant and pulled back. So that was sort of that choice.
When you set up for rehearsal, do you sort of take a position in the room? Do you move over the course of each do you sort of like try to find positions and sort of think through, take me through that specific process, because obviously it might be cord working with the actors, and then it's your opportunity to kind of like visualize, okay, when this is, I see where they're going, so now I want to adjust this. Tell me a little bit of how you do that, and where I've done it where I've been in a room and I see the director standing with their back to the windows, all in front light, and I'm sitting there on the opposite side of the room, and I'm thinking, gosh, how are they? I hope they don't want to see it from there, because they're like, that's going to be the worst position for light. But tell me a little bit about those things, those experiences with you.
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky that, once we selected the locations, Cord and I went back to each one and stepped through each scene in the room. So I had sort of planted the seed early on of where I wanted it. And, these are very experienced actors, and they want to look good too. So I think they were really good about keeping that in mind and not leaning up against the wall the whole scene or anything. So I didn't have to interfere too much. There were definitely times when I made suggestions after watching, but yeah, I like to watch it from where I hope the master is going to play out, and then sort of move around and see what other shots what other angles I want to make sure we get.
This was, you were saying you went to LA at the end. This is that little scene at the end, which, no spoilers, but I assume this is that one day in LA.
Yes, this is.
I mean, is this a 50-foot techno? Is this like just something to get you high for this last little shot?
That's me on top of a parking garage.
Oh, right, because I was wondering, I forgot whether it was moving or not, but I was like, it has obviously that pan or the tilt in the pan, but the
yeah, we had a little jib that with a hot head we stuck off the end of the parking garage so we could get a little float. But that was my goal, for it to look like a 50-foot.
Well, yeah, I was like even higher, because I thought, well, that's like that feels at least maxing out 50 feet, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, that was why we picked that angle, because I knew we could get as high as possible on the parking garage looking that direction.
Take me back for a second, just to early Cristina, and how did you get into this? Like, just take me to the history of you and cinematography, and how did you end up where you are now?
Well, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I didn't, obviously knew that the film world existed, but I thought you had to be an actor to work in the film business. I didn't really understand that there were other jobs or what that meant. So I was really into photography as a teenager. I found a film camera in my garage, and I, built a dark room, and I would take photos all the time and, play around with exposures. And I thought I wanted to be a photographer. I mean, I still love photography. I did want to be a photographer. And when I was 17, I went to a party in Venice Beach, and I met this director who said he was shooting a music video. And I said, oh, I'm a photographer. And he said, why don't you come take pictures? And this was in the early 2000s, and I showed up, and it was Death Cab for Cutie, which was like the biggest band at the time. So I was like, oh, this is a real job. I better, not mess up. So I shot on slide film, because that's what we shot on in high school, so that everyone could critique it in class. And I delivered those to the label, and they were like, what? Why would you give us slides? So I had to sort of sell that. And I met a lot of people on that set, and it was that day that I saw what a DP was. I was like, oh, what is this camera and the dolly, and they're moving it, and there's all these lights, and it just was like photography on steroids. And that was that moment that I decided that was what I wanted to do.
Oh,
And
that's cool. Do you remember the DP or no?
I do. It was Ross Reegi.
Oh, it was? Oh, I'd worked with
Yeah.
Ross. Oh, that's
Oh,
cool.
really? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And the director was Ace Norton, and I kind of fell into their crew. One day they asked me to pick up cigarettes for the director on the way to set, and I had to say I'm not old enough to buy cigarettes. So they sort of realized that I had been sort of, not conning them, but I hadn't, they didn't know that I was in high school. So they let me start PAing on set, and I worked in every department. I worked in art department. I worked as an editor, editing, little music videos and documentaries and whatever anyone would let me edit. I worked as a, production manager. So I was seeing everyone's lighting orders
Oh,
come in.
wow.
And I made friends with all the gaffers and grips. And I worked for this one incredible producer, Melissa Larson, for a long time. And she knew it was my dream to be a DP. So sometimes I'd be, coordinating on a commercial, and she'd realize we weren't going to make the day. So they'd take the backup camera body and they'd be like, here, take my coordinator and she's going to shoot B camera. So I got operating experience that way. And I met a lot of directors, and it was actually, one of those directors had a $5,000 music video, and no one wanted to shoot it because the concept was that we were going to light a guy on fire in super high speed while he was shredding guitar in a garage. So the entire budget went to special effects, and I had a 5D and the Diablo camera when it had just come out. And we went to Home Depot and got a ton of work lights and pointed every light we could, and had the special effects guy come and we lit this guy on fire as he was shredding on the guitar. And that was our music. That was my first real music video that someone let me shoot.
That's super cool. I want to see that one. I mean, obviously, it's like the famous Spike Jonze one with the guy running on fire. But still, now this one with the guy shredding, I want to see this one. Was it obviously a high speed? Because obviously, if it's all, only so much time. Was it like photosonics? Oh, I don't know. Would it be our Phantom at that time? I guess.
It was the Diablo, which I don't even know.
I don't even know the
anymore.
Diablo. Tell me the.
Yeah.
I mean, I even said it. I was like, "Is that that was a high speed camera? I should probably know that."
No, I mean, it honestly was like a blip on the radar. It was invented by a scientist who was using it for some sort of like photography. I forget the specifics. I don't want to misquote
But it
it.
obviously
But
went high speed.
yeah, it went up to 800 frames a second, which is what we shot at.
Wow. Hence all
Yeah.
the lights pointed at the thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's super cool. And then, okay, so you did that video. And then what was the thing that sort of started making you go, okay, now this is obviously, I'm sort of, what was like your next big kind of like watershed moment in your career?
I mean, it was always my dream to move into the feature space. So I'm trying to think of, exactly how it came about. There's definitely a good 10 years where I was just doing music videos and commercials and shorts. And it's a lot further down the line. There was definitely music videos that came up and bands I was excited to work with that, I never dreamed of working with. And then I actually met Dakota Johnson she was directing a Coldplay music video. And we had an amazing time. It was, a really fun music video to shoot. There's a lot of dancing, and we worked with an incredible choreographer in London. And a few months later, I was up for a film and I saw she was a producer on it. Right. So I reached out and I said, hey, it would be so fun to work with you again. And because it was a first-time director, they wanted a more experienced DP. So they had said, we really would love to work with you, but everyone's nervous that it's first-time directors. They want a really experienced DP, and it's just not going to happen, but we'll think of you in the future. And then COVID hit, and once the movie got back up and running, they had lost their DP, and they let me meet on it. And I ended up booking that film, and I did a few pictures with Dakota. So that was I think that was the breaking point for my narrative journey.
But that first one, that was Cha Cha Real Smooth, or no, that was
That was I Am Okay.
oh yeah.
It
And
went to
then
Sundance, but it never got released anywhere.
oh, that's awesome. I mean, I feel like people, maybe it should be obvious, but I always say, and obviously all the people that help us get work are incredibly important. But one of the first steps for me always is like, what do I know some person related to this project, just to like allow myself to get an opportunity to meet on it. This was like the history of everything was like trying to go, oh, I actually know a friend of a friend, because again, that's the nature of the business. And I think sometimes people think, oh, it means you have to know somebody. It's actually the opposite. I feel like it's actually, you do know people. Every job you have is an opportunity for you to sort of like, have a bigger sphere of influence of people that you know. And it's not just like, oh, I can't get anywhere because I don't know anyone. It's like, no, every movie, there might be a chance for you to like, even just get the meeting that might not lead to that movie, but lead to one in the future, that kind of thing. I think it's really important. Like that you reached out to her, that then led to that, extending that relationship, I think is a really good lesson.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you really never know. The fact that, Cord's assistant on this film remembered me from a
There you
Lizzo
go.
music video like years before and happened to throw my name in the hat, it, changed the course of my life, really. So you really never know. And I think it's so important to like the people that you're working with when you, especially going into a feature and one with a tight schedule. And to me, it's always really important to work with people that love what they do and are excited about it, because it can get so difficult. And if it feels like a job to somebody, that's going to radiate throughout the set. So it is those people that you meet on set that just have a passion for it in the way that you do, and then you're going to remember each other and want to keep building on those relationships, I think.
100%, 100%. All right, what was the sort of two things, the hardest day of shooting and a day that you learned, like what was the thing you learned that you didn't expect to learn from making this movie, or the thing you really take away when you think about it? I mean, I think it's going to be the next watershed thing in your career, that'll continue to sort of give you more opportunities. But like, what does it mean to you, this film?
I mean, when I read this script, I thought, this is the script that could change my life if this works out. It's so smart and funny. And meeting with Cord, he's the nicest person. And I knew that we would really collaborate and have fun doing it. And I think everyone on this film, even though I joke with the producer, he said, someone asked him what the hardest day was, and he said there was not an easy day. Every day was the hardest day, but we all really respected and liked each other and were excited about the material. So it made it doable. But the hardest day, I mean, looking through this, I guess for me personally, the Harvard Club, this at the end was the scariest moment in the film for me, because up in that ceiling, it's all a facade. So we couldn't rig anything. We couldn't do any crossbars. It wasn't structurally sound. And there was a helium shortage going on, which I guess probably still hasn't resolved. And the only way to light the room was with balloons. And we didn't know if we were going to get helium until I think the day before.
What was your plan B?
I mean, our plan B, we had the gaffer and the grip and I and the best way, we spent hours pacing that room after scouting and on the weekend, trying to come up with solutions. I mean, there was everything from like bouncing a bunch of par cans into the ceiling and like tying off, different sort of bounces. We were thinking about shooting it during the day and leaving all the curtains open in that room, and then sort of color timing it to look like the evening.
Describe to me, there's window light if it was during the day? Like,
yeah, behind that chandelier, those 3 velvet things. Those are curtains that we could have
Oh, interesting.
opened up and then tried to time it to look like the evening, and never, then we were going to have to do it. So we never showed, above, but
But use it
were,
as your lighting. Oh my God. Yeah.
and diffusing that. It's just, we had a day and a half in that room to shoot all of these.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of things. No spoilers, but yeah, it's got a lot of stuff going on and coverage and all the rest.
Yeah, and no, real. We had the first half of the day to pre-light, and then the second half of the day to shoot. So whatever we ate into was gonna take away from shooting time. So when that balloon, like I remember our best boy running into the room, and he got it was like the most stress relief I'd felt in a very long time.
Yeah, that I can see that. As like, yeah, that's also a big set with the most amount of extras probably of any scene in the movie and all the rest of it that makes it one of your more expensive days for the production. Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah. And we had squibs. There was a lot going on.
I mean, it's funny. It's Jeffrey Wright's been around so long, and he's such a great actor. Obviously, you go back to even like Basquiat, right? And it's like a totally
Yeah.
different guy. And then extremely loud, incredibly close. He's got a great little role in, and all these other amazing films. But I don't know why it was like it felt like it was a version of him I hadn't seen in such a lovely way. I mean, he really obviously the movie lives and dies with him, and the tone was so consistent in this film that I never felt like. I felt like the director and you and the whole team was really in control of tone in such a consistent way that I appreciate it, because it's the hardest thing to do in any movie, particularly one that has humor and needs other things to really land, serious things and surprises and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Thank you. Cord's biggest thing was he never wanted it to become farcical, because it is really important that you relate to these characters, and there is so much depth and there's so much going on in this family, and we wanted that to be an equally big aspect of the film. So everyone was always talking about tone and how to achieve that, and keeping it consistent. So even in the my favorite scene in the film probably is when Monk sits down to write the novel.
Oh, right. Yeah. Here, let me take you there, because that obviously also is probably the most, in a way, it's like the most stylized thing in the script of sorts.
Yeah. So when the characters appeared, it's written in the script that this scene starts happening, and Cord and I really discussed, originally he wanted to shoot it in an alleyway, and then schedule wise and production wise, what was feasible, we sort of ended up moving it into the office, and figuring out, that was sort of my biggest fear tonally, was how are we going to introduce these elements of surrealism in a way that aren't going to be like a record scratch for the rest of the film. So I think actually it was a very happy accident that saved us was Oak, the character on the left there. He showed up to set, and he with the eye patch on, because he had scratched his cornea that day. And in this moment, our plan was that all the lights were going to get dimmed down, and this spotlight was going to come up on him for his soliloquy, which is the absolute worst form of torture for someone with a scratched cornea. Any light that makes their pupil dilate, it's extremely, extremely painful. So I mean, I feel so bad, but he came to set, and he wanted to shoot with his scratched cornea, and he powered through. You could tell he was in a lot of pain, so our takes were very limited. So this is another area that Steadicam came in handy, but we ended up not being able to do the spotlight effect, which I think in turn actually helped the grounded feel of the film. So it worked in our favor in the end, but in the moment we sort of had to scrap our entire idea and just go with a more grounded version that I think really helped, especially coming back at the end of knowing how far we could take the surrealism or not.
Yeah, that's a great example. Really great example. And in a way, like you say, in the alley version, was gonna intercut? Or was it? It wasn't like he was writing in the alley, or was he gonna like? Was he gonna sort of be in the alley as well, sort of in that
Yeah,
surreal kind of way?
he was gonna be in the alley and then sort of disappear, and we were just gonna let the scene play out and then, cut back to him. But
Yeah,
yeah,
this way works really wonderfully. So it's like, again, I always feel like those things generally work out because that's the way they were supposed to be. When you have to make
right.
kind of, to have to go to plan B or C or whatever it is. Yeah.
That's so much of what it is on indie filmmaking. I think to answer your question, that's what I learned is like to not have resistance. That if something comes up, you have to look at it as like an opportunity to find new inspiration and to problem solve. And you can't get stuck in how you originally saw something, especially on a schedule like this, or it's just being able to pivot, I think, is a huge necessity in this film.
Massive. I mean, I literally Garden State, we had 22 days and we lost, like we had a thing happen and we had to rejigger everything. And then we literally had to almost rescout the whole movie over a weekend because we lost like half the locations. And it was like the kind of thing that feels like this will literally implode the entire film. Nope. It just like found our way right back and actually still finished on time and nothing changed. And it was just like, and every new location was the one that was meant to be in a way. So
you shot that in 22 days?
yeah, but that's what made me think of this film, because this film's more complex in a lot of ways. That movie was really easy. But yeah, it was a similar idea. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
we had a lot of locations.
You do. You have a complex film for that. I'm very impressed. Well, listen, again, I feel like the movie is wonderful, and your part in it really makes a difference, and I can see it, and I'm just excited for people to see the film because it's really good, and I think it's one of those films for this season that just makes you smile, and it's also has surprises that I didn't expect. Like there's a moment in the film, I'm not going to ruin it, but I was literally going, no, whoa, like, no, like I mean, I just was like, that's not where it just went, did it? And
oh my gosh, I want to know what's.
Well, I don't want to ruin it, but I'll tell you when we hang up. But I was that into it that I didn't see it coming, and then it sort of it really carried me emotionally. I could see how invested I was in that moment watching it. So kudos to you and the filmmakers for sure.
Thank you so much.
Well, listen, I'm excited to see what's next for you, and people should watch American Fiction and see Christina's work, and we'll get some of these music videos up on ShotDeck. Right? We'll work that out right after this. I want to see some more of your work represented on the site.
You. And thank you for making ShotDeck. I was not paid to plug it in any way, but I do. It is such an incredible resource, and
Well, like you said, I would just really wanted to shine a light on this film because I liked it so much. So when we set this up, I don't do any research. I don't go, is she a ShotDeck user? Does she? It was nice to hear that you use it, but that's great. That's great to hear. Yeah, there you go. All right, good. Well, we'll see you next time. We'll see you on the next one, Cristina. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see everyone out there on the next Shot Talk. All right.